Good morning. I'm Brandon Harding, the Assistant High School Principal, and this morning our Donuts with Mr. Decker's topic is Dropout, RTI, which is Response to Interventions, and the Alternative School Program that we've started. Dr. Sean Page is going to discuss a little bit of RTI and what he's doing with his building. Connie Beasley, who also is the school social worker, is going to discuss how the alternative school is supporting our programs with dropout initiatives, and I'm going to give an overall picture of what we've done with dropout and how we're trying to improve numbers here in the rural school district. Obviously the issues when we talk about dropout, it's just basically kids not completing school. What are we trying to do? We're trying to get them to remain in school, which gets to credits. How are we going to improve it? Goes to the entire plan that I'll discuss, and how each person that talks today fits into that plan, and then how everyone is involved. Here is a big part of why we're doing these things and talking about these dropout initiatives is you can look at our graduation rate over the last years. You notice in 2009 we dropped. The state wants us to be at 83% or better, and obviously we've dipped below that, and we're trying to climb back up. So that's a big reason why we're doing what we're doing. This is the high school attendance rate. The state wants us to be at 94, so we keep fluctuating right around 93, and we're also trying to improve attendance because if we know that if kids have better attendance, they're going to be more successful in school. This is an interesting and difficult thing to understand because the graduation rate talks about how a kid would necessarily disappear from their graduation class, and then the dropout rate is actually how many kids we're losing in that particular year. So it's a little bit confusing because you'd think in 2011 with a 2.7% dropout rate that our graduation rate should be better. So the numbers don't actually match because basically what's going on is back here in 2008, 2009, and 2010, we lost lots of students. So these dropout rates are higher, and those ultimately affect the graduation rate of 2011. Dr. Page, I don't know how to go backwards. So you can see here, even though our dropout numbers are going down, the graduation rate is not where it should be, but that's because back in here, we were losing them. And so we're doing lots of initiatives to keep them from going out the door. These are the actual numbers by year. So we're losing an entire class. Our average in the classroom is 26 per teacher, so we're losing over a whole class for each graduating class, which is not what we want. Here are some things that Aurora dropout looks like. 1 in 4 Hispanic students drop out. Discipline is not necessarily a key factor. Pregnancy causes a lot of problems with school completion. Students with disabilities end up being misrepresented most of the time. We've made major gains in that in the last 2 years though. Attendance isn't necessarily a smoking gun, and we lose kids between the freshman and sophomore year. So what we did is 2 years ago we started a dropout initiative, and these were the members of the committee. Connie Beasley being one that's on them and now part of this whole process at the alternative school. Mr. Kirby is the actual dropout coordinator, the junior high principal, and then it's actually Moreland now, is the administrative support. What we started with is a plan, and these things are how it's going to affect what Dr. Page is going to talk about, is how are we going to intervene academically? Because bottom line, kids don't graduate because they don't get credits. So basically we're focusing on getting kids out of that F column, get them the credits so they can get to graduation. We want to try to improve their behavior, making sure they're not suspended, making sure they're getting the class time they need to be successful. Obviously, improve their attendance rate. We needed to go out and speak to all the different buildings. We talked to all the different buildings about how dropout's not a 9 through 12 issue, it's a K through 12 issue. And we've also gone into the community and tried to get some support in work programs. How they can come in. We're going to have some people come in and talk to the freshmen about what is an employer looking for and why is that high school diploma so important. The intervention interventions is big in every building, and Dr. Page is going to touch on that, on what they're doing in his building. And I'll have a slide here a little bit talking about what we're doing in the high school. The attendance committee, we've gone up a whole percent. That first slide showed we went from 92.1 all the way to 93% last year. So the attendance committee has been working really hard on pushing students to be here, and we've done that a little bit with policy. It's another big thing with the dropout is, why are kids dropping out? And we call it push-pull effects. So are we pushing kids out the door, or are we trying to keep them in? So if our attendance policy is so harsh that kids decide, I just want to leave, then it's not working. So we took a look at that. We also looked at our discipline. Another big thing was ISS. A kid that's struggling in class, and you give him ISS, and now he's out of class for 3 days. What's the total effect on that kid? So those aren't good things. Those are all pushing effects. We're going to push a kid out the door. So we went to make some changes in there. Obviously, what we've talked about is trying to change all these three things, and these three things will all, in effect, change that dropout rate. What we're doing from a committee point of view is we're meeting monthly. We keep talking about strategies. We keep updating what's going on. We're in contact with the state monthly to see what are other people doing, how do we stay fresh, how do we stay innovative. And then, of course, you know, the building teams with our half-day professional development and things are targeting all kinds of things to reach those students. What we're trying to do here, again, is focus on credits. If we can get them credits, we can get them to graduation. So we're looking at how can we do a better job of getting credit recovery through the year. What's going to happen with summer school with all of the different monies that's going on? It's very difficult to guess. And then this year, I'd say Mr. Bradley is working on interventions here at the high school. And we are working on the technology use and how can we faster collect information of their academic progress and get it back to teachers and back to those that are in their freshman success classes and guided study halls. This is basically showing what we do with a kid, what we provide for every kid, what we're providing for a student that ends up with an F, what we start doing with a kid that has 2 Fs or more, and then ultimately we've added the alternative school that's at the peak of the pyramid where we've done everything we can and the student we need to get them over there to get them to be successful. So this is probably a good point to probably stop and allow Mrs. Beasley to discuss a little bit about what's going on at the alternative school.
I'm Connie Beasley. The alternative school is located in the basement of the Armory, over by the junior high. We take into account the 3 factors that Mr. Harding just went over with you: attendance, behavior, and culture. Students are referred to us by the counseling office over here after reviewing those 3 factors with each student. Let's see, we have a large mix of students over there. Some have never had attendance issues. Some are very bright and were just bored in classes, and so probably that caused some discipline issues with them. We offer 2 lines of education, 2 passive education. Some of the students are doing the Missouri Options Program, which is like a GED program, but within the school they're required to do seat hours, work hours, and community service hours. The other path is credit recovery. Students who had problems in previous classes are making up credits so that they can graduate along with their cohort and graduate on time. Let's see, we offer, as far as attendance goes, phone calls are made if a student is not there within the first hour. If they are not there by the end of that hour, home visits are done, and lots of times that gets them there. So that's how we're dealing with the attendance issues over there right now. As far as the discipline, we're connected with the high school, so any issues, just call Mr. Colchin or Mr. Harding, help us with that. Let's see. Was there anything else you wanted to go over? So far we've had about, we've got 16 students at the school right now. In the first 3 months, we've served 26 students. 10 have left due to moving, which a lot of our students are transient, moving, homeschooling, and I think only 1 has opted to drop out. So, I'll turn back over to Mr. Harding.
you, Mrs. Beasley. Over here in the high school, obviously, we're doing lots of things individually with students. A lot of the burden falls on the classroom teacher when we talk about Tier 1 intervention. So is that teacher calling home? Is that teacher doing everything? Are they differentiating instruction? So it's not just a burden on the dropout committee to go, oh, we're going to look at this kid and specifically deal with it. Everybody is involved, and it starts with that classroom teacher. One thing that we looked at, and Mrs. Spinell, the counselor in the high school, was very instrumental in creating some of this plan. But we created a 5th hour where it's basically an academic lab. So if you want to call it a study hall, but it's a little different than a study hall. There's core teachers that are available in every subject. So a student that's struggling in one can be moved from where they are in their class to the teacher they need the most support from. And so that helps us during the school day address a student's academic issue where they may not necessarily get that if they're not a kid that likes to stay after school. We're also adjusting a little bit how we do this. Mr. Bradley's doing an outstanding job. We're focusing certain days of the week, we're focusing on math and English or social studies, science. So we're not just trying to cover something every day. So we're trying to narrow it down and get those kids what they need on a daily basis. So the scheduling was a big part of addressing some of this issue.
Matt Foley, contact the office, please. Matt Foley.
One thing that's different maybe than a lot of schools, and you can see it here, is we've actually added an 8th period. Before we used to have a 20-minute schedule for, it was a great big study hall basically, and we varied how we handled it with allowing kids to get some privilege time or that academic support that they needed. Many of our kids don't need a lot of the intense support, and so sometimes they're left in the dark. But we altered it a little bit by adding the 8th hour. We were able to create the big academic labs and the guided study halls that we're trying to make this effective. So the time of day didn't extend, but it's allowed us to be a lot more creative, keep class sizes down. So it's all part of the plan. This is just some of the data that I would take a look at, and we can track from month to month. What are we doing? Or from progress to progress, a 3-week progress. Are we going down? Are we going up? And these data are going to look a little different. This is another sample page where it's easy for me to look in, and we can tell, obviously, some kids are struggling in math in this particular slide. So that lets me go to that teacher and say, what is going on? How can we support what's going on? We had an academy as freshmen, kids that were identified from 8th grade to 9th grade, and we've been tracking these kids. And so these are kids that we were trying to make sure we got through to graduation, and you can see a lot of them moved, a lot of them withdrew, but they were target kids. Here's a multiple F list, and again, we can look on there and we can instantly find out, are they getting a guided study hall? If they're not, then maybe we need to get them support. Are they in a freshman success class? Not sure. So this piece of information lets us look very quickly on maybe we need to alter a kid's schedule. This is a sample letter that goes home to let someone know that, look, your child is failing these 3 classes down here. The intervention committee very strongly says you should stay after school and get the support you need, or at least call and start communicating with that teacher. So not only is the teacher making contact, we're sending something from the office. The intervention folks meet. This would be an example of what we're doing, what we talk about, and we broke down by grade certain teachers so they could focus on it. And the thing about the teachers is if they have mostly freshmen, they're going to be in this freshman intervention group. If they have mostly sophomores, they'll be in there. And then upperclassmen teachers. These next few slides just talk about what went on with OSS, what went on with ISS, and 916 days out of class 2 years ago, and that is a push effect. Out of school suspension, the difference between, and the change of mindset, the difference between 2 years ago and last year, over 200 days difference. Those academic days help recoup credit. Doesn't mean that we weren't doing discipline. What we looked at over here in some of the OSS categories.
Daniel Harbaugh and April. Paulson, come to the office, please. Haley Paulson, come to the office, please. Brenda Humboldt and Haley Paulson.
Is we looked at Saturday school and we replaced some minor OSS things with some Saturday schools so that we're going to continue to keep the kid in school and we're not doing the pushy phase. This is just the page of the handbook that describes how are we going to do detention and how are we doing Saturday school. This is a policy change that affects those push-pull.
Jamie, go to the band room, please, Jamie.
You know, we did a comparison last year and it was phenomenal. The freshmen did an outstanding job. Of course, those freshmen this year are sophomores. But obviously the behavior made a huge improvement last year. We make improvement by what we measure. So we're getting into making sure the kids see what is their attendance rate per class. How are they doing? Our target's 95, so we obviously can see where we're going. We want to celebrate those kids. Who's not in trouble? Who's doing a good job of being here? These pictures on the side are, students of the month. Perfect attendance winners. We did that a little different. Instead of doing somebody that's perfect all year, we said, let's just do it by month, because a kid can concentrate and be perfect for a month. And so it really, I think, has made an effect. A lot of these kids talk to me and let me know how excited they were to get a gift certificate for their attendance. Part of this initiative, we met with the freshmen and we brought in some graduates to say, hey, tell us about what you did. Tell us what's been going on. What's important for these kids to know from a graduate point of view. We talked to them about what are their chances to make money. Obviously,
Landon Decker, Sawyer, Welch, and Patrick Wheeler, contact the office, please. Landon Decker, Sawyer, Welch, and Patrick Wheeler.
There's a big difference in the ability to make money from a high school graduate to someone that did not graduate. These are negative outcomes we shared. These are things that are nationwide, not necessarily just Aurora High School, but just percentages. High school dropouts are 72% more likely to be unemployed. The counselor did a really neat job of color coding when the freshmen came in, and they were represented by who wouldn't have a job and who would. And it was very interesting for them to see when the kids stood up that wouldn't have a job as they looked around, the impact that made hopefully helps them stay in school. 82% of crimes are committed by people who dropped out of school. So obviously it becomes a bigger effect. The cost goes to the community, so we've got to work really hard to keep them in school. One of the things here that obviously is a kid that doesn't graduate really has a lot of problems with what they think about themselves. And so we've got to really try to get them the support to feel comfortable and keep that drive going to get to the graduation. It definitely is not a high school issue. It starts early. It's not something that just the high school teachers can address. And so we can look here at some of the data that says, a kid in a first grade that's aggressive, maybe has over-discipline at that age level, is going to be somebody we need to keep an eye on all the way through the process. We can really track by third grade, pretty accurate, by their attendance. So we've really been pushing administrators in the lower buildings, hey, get those kids in a better routine, because we're not going to be able to fix that routine in 9th grade by ourselves. Students who repeat a grade as early as K through 4 are 5 times more likely to drop out. So this starts getting into the area where Dr. Page is going to talk about what is going on at his building level. And then at the 6th grade level, and these are probably no big surprise, but if someone by the 6th grade level has problems in these areas, we're going to definitely see a problem with them by the time they're in the high school. I hate to just read to you, but 6th graders who do not attend school regularly receive poor behavior marks or fail math or English. We start talking about the percent chance that they can graduate and when they'll graduate. For us, though, the hard part is if 20% of these are going to graduate a year late, they're on our dropout list. So even though we're glad for that student to graduate, we took a hit. One of the biggest factors we talk about is the prison system in California. They look at 3rd grade reading levels and create their cells on the new prisons according to the readers at that age. So again, that goes back to accountability is not just 9 through 12 for graduation and dropout. It's K through 12. this point, it's probably good, since we're talking about elementary things, to go ahead and have Dr. Page talk about what they're doing with interventions to help affect this entire process. Dr. Page.
So as Mr. Hardy said, really dropouts start at the younger grades. So by 5th or 6th grade, if a student's not being successful, then we have to do something to address that at the early grades. It's too late. It's too late by the time they get to 9th grade. So one of the approaches that we use is based on a professional learning communities concept. What do we want kids to know? How do we know when they know it? What do we do when they do? And what do we do when they don't? So what RTI really addresses is, what do we do when kids don't get it? A lot of dropout comes from the fact that students are successful in school. So one of the things that we do is we take a proactive approach to how we're going to address things with students. We don't wait for special education services. We don't wait for anything. We help a kid as soon as they're having difficulty. So I'll kind of walk you through what our process looks like. All of our students, what we do is we strive to give them high quality education. So what that means is we're developing lesson plans that are interesting for kids, that integrate technology. We're using multiple different approaches to address the information. We use a lot of techniques in order to engage our kids and get them into instruction, try to be in touch with what they're learning. And so for this, 85% of our kids, they get it at the first time. And so that's where we start out. So what we do is we take a common time, and after teachers will go through and they'll do 3 or 4 days of instruction, and then they'll give students a formative assessment. And what that is that's for information. So it's not for a grade. And what they do is they say, okay, was our instruction effective? If the instruction was effective, great, we have kids, and they'll go to an enrichment process, which I'll talk a little bit about. If they didn't do well, then we're going to get them help. We don't wait to give them help a week later. We give them help the next day. So part of what we do is we give them instantaneous assistance as soon as they're struggling. That way it cuts way down on the frustration for kids, cuts down on frustrations for teachers, and we all want to know, we all know how popular video games are. Video games are popular for kids because they give instant feedback. And so we try to model that in our school and give instant feedback. So we have a common time, and all teachers are giving that same formative assessment. So we know how the student is performing towards a standard. We know all of our teachers, how they're doing towards teaching that standard. And we'll use that data and information to, one, inform our teachers on how they can improve their instruction. The second piece is we're going to put our kids that are struggling the most with our teachers that are doing the best. And that will look different each time we give a formative assessment. So some teachers are very good at teaching some math concepts. They will get the students that are struggling. They'll go in after they do the instruction, they give the formative assessment. The very next day, kids are going into flexible groups. So we'll have some kids that are going to enrichment activities. That means that they're still working on the same concept, but the concept may be at a higher level or more challenging for them. And then if they didn't do well, they're going to go into a small group setting with the teacher that did the best on that skill, and that's what we call our Tier 1 intervention. So as I said, our teachers immediately score their formative assessment. So as kids are finishing, they're coming up, the teachers are correcting that paper, they're giving instant feedback to those kids. So they know exactly what they did well and exactly what they need to work on. It's very open, and just normally the way that's handled is kids finish at different rates. So as they're finishing, the teachers are giving them feedback and correcting things right away. They immediately score those, and then what our students do is they actually assemble their data. So we have a spreadsheet that's up on our smartboards, And so we use that technology, and the kids will go in and they'll put what they scored on that particular assessment. And then what ends up happening is it will sort the kids according to whether they got enrichment or they got remediation. Kids always want to go to the enrichment classes, but sometimes at any time of the year, a student will end up in remediation. So after they go through tier 1, like I said, if a student's mastered when a student doesn't have mastery, they'll go to remediation, and we'll go through and we'll reteach that skill. That doesn't mean that we're teaching the same lesson again. We're teaching it a different way. We're using different modalities. We might use a different approach. We might be more active. We might use some innovative techniques. We might integrate more technology. It's not the same thing over again. If they didn't get it the first time that way, they're probably not going to get it the second time that way either. So this also allows our students to get instruction from a different teacher, because sometimes there'll be a different teacher that will give a different concept, and the kids will get it with them where they didn't get it with their regular teacher. If they got it, they go to an enrichment for that grouping, and they have a lot of learning opportunities there. So sometimes in enrichment, if we were looking for math, we might be talking about geometry skills. And so for enrichment, what the kids will do is they'll go in and they'll work on engineering a bridge made out of pasta sticks and marshmallows, and try to span a distance so that students understand how geometry relates to building bridges. So they really enjoy those types of things. And in that tier 1, it's just for one day. So we don't introduce any new concepts for that day in that particular subject. So the kids that are getting remediation aren't falling behind, and everybody's getting instruction at what their level is. So the next thing we'll do is the students will return to their classes, and they will take a summative assessment. So we'll say, what we're asking is, did our instruction work? You know, the first 3 days we had a hard time, but then we came back and remediated. Now did the kids get it? So we'll give them a summative assessment. That is for a grade. If the kids continue to struggle, then what they'll do is they'll go into our tier 2 process, which happens every day after school for the last 50 minutes of our day, 5 days a week. They'll go into another small group setting. They'll get instruction on a particular skill for those 7 days. So we're not shotgun blasting kids with, you know, they need this and that and everything. We're using our data to drive exactly what our kids need to know. So we're looking at that. We're giving them specific instruction. Again, it's small group. So we have some teachers that have more kids in their class, and some teachers that have maybe 4 or 5 kids that they're going to spend that week with to determine and to help kids get the skills that they need. So that happens every day for 50 minutes. Students also, when they go into remediation or enrichment, they have an enrichment homeroom. So what happens is through a 20-day cycle, according to how they do with their assessments, they'll move in and out of those homeroom enrichment classes. So if they're struggling on one skill but not the other, they'll go back to that enrichment class when teachers are addressing the second skill and they don't need it. So we're not wasting kids' time. We're not wasting teachers' time, and we're not wasting all of our efforts. We're getting very specific with what our kids need to know, and then we're remediating them as they need it. So that goes on for 5 to 7 days, and we're going to monitor those kids. If they continue to struggle after those 7 days, then what we do is we'll put them into a tier 3 instruction, which we use our Title I teachers, and we bring them in. And we do a push-in program, which the Title I teachers actually go inside the classroom and help that student inside the classroom. So, and then we just keep track of all that information. It's a big data machine. That data drives our discussions as teachers. It drives our discussions with our students, with our parents. We're able to specifically tell what skills students are having difficult time with, and when we do that, we can ask for help from the parents, say, hey, they're having a hard time with this skill. Can you practice this at home for 20 minutes? We can get tutoring for them. There's a lot of different services and things that we can use based on this system of remediating kids. What it ultimately happens in the high school, what it looks like in the high school, is that you have kids that aren't frustrated, that haven't struggled for the last 12 years, and now, you know, they're done. They just don't get it. When kids don't get it, we help them immediately. We keep helping them. If they still don't get it, we keep helping them. Ultimately, if we needed to, which has only happened on a few occasions, is our intervention system sometimes helps kids that fall through the cracks if they actually need special education services. Now that's talking about 1% of our kids. It doesn't happen very often. So you heard Mr. Harding talk about there's a disproportionate amount of special needs kids that are dropping out. Well, if their needs are getting addressed in the 5th and 6th grade, chances are they may not even be in special needs. They may be part of the general population, just need a little extra help. And so we get very specific as to how we help them. So that's really our intervention process in a nutshell. Our intervention process is part of helping the high school. So like I said, they want to drop out at 5th and 6th grade. They just usually stay in because they're young, but once they get into high school, they're wanting to go. So that's what we do.
Anybody have any questions?
Can you please clarify the difference between the graduation rate versus the dropout rate? Because just because a student doesn't graduate with their original class, are they considered in the dropout rate or the graduation rate?
Let's say a student dropped out last year.
Okay, but how do you mean dropout? Is it
So
no longer in existence?
they left school and they did not enroll anywhere else.
Okay.
And they did not sign homeschool papers. So that goes on a report that we send monthly to DESE. Now, let's say that kid was not a senior. All right, so he's going to go on to our dropout rate for that year. So, and typically what we're looking at, I showed the slide that there's 30 or so kids that we're losing per class, but we're not losing them all in the same year. So that kid's data would be recorded in that dropout rate as a junior. But then the following year, when he was supposed to graduate, he's going to show back up as a number. Let's say he was the 127th kid. If we only had 100 graduates, he's counting for that percentage. So 100 divided by 127, that number doesn't disappear. Now, if that kid transferred to a different school, then what would happen in that senior year when we do the graduation rate, it'd be 100 divided by 126, because he actually, or she actually, was, their responsibility is now to a different school. Same if they sign the homeschool. Instead of that continuing to be the number that we do our divisor by, it's going to lower that denominator. Does that answer that?
So then if a student, let's say that they are currently a sophomore, but because of failing classes next year, they're still a sophomore versus being a junior. So does their number go towards our graduation rate, or is it also incorporated with our dropout?
If they're still in the building and they're still on our books, then that's not going to affect either one of those numbers until the graduation senior year. So if that student struggles and doesn't make it that year, then we take the ding. And what's frustrating sometimes, we even take the ding if that student was missing a credit. They cannot go on our graduation rate. They become a dropout, and then we will help them get the credit after graduation. If it's the next year, if it's credit recovery, and they'll still graduate, but yet we've lost it. If they're not done by June of their senior year, then...
So then technically it's kind of misleading to say that they're a dropout when they're still here, but they just are a little...
And that's something the state's really looking at too. I mean, 4 years is what they're giving us, and that's it. And so I think there's some new data out there on how they're going to do that.
You said that it starts early on, but I noticed that your dropout committee or your intervention committee that deals with that doesn't have anybody from the lower grades. Why is
And
that?
That's when we initially started it. It was obviously we were focusing on 7 through 12 and what can we do right in that. But obviously, you know, with the RTI that Dr. Page is doing, that's going on even in 3rd and 4th grade. It's going on in, you know, K2 and those kinds of things. If we can get the academic piece, that's another big data, is if a kid's struggling in that math and English. So if they're addressing that issue, they're addressing the attendance issue, then it's all working together. To answer that question specifically, one of the goals on the plan for the committee is we're going to reach out to those elementary schools, but we're starting that by actually going to talk to the counselors at those grade levels. Because the reality is we don't want to poke anybody in the eye, because we know they're doing things that make kids successful. So we don't want to say, what are you doing? Because they already have plans in place. So what we're going to do is talk with the counselors. What are they doing? And then how can we tweak it, or how can we continue to expand that committee, and then say, how are we really addressing it K through 12?
So you are planning to expand the committee
yes,
and bring
and
those,
we're gonna
because I think
start-
it's important even for teachers. I mean, obviously the principals know how important it is.
And we
but
met
also
with those
teachers.
buildings, and they're all aware, and they're really kind of wanting to support and help in any way they can. But we're going to start with the counselors and then see how do they support those kids already before we go in and start, you know, pointing fingers and saying things. So I think they're probably already doing things. But that goes back to that sharing information from top to bottom, so that we all know what's going on, and that we capture that kid from 2nd grade to 3rd grade. There's no loss there. We didn't just go, oh, I'm glad he's gone out of our building. No, we're going to continue to help this kid. And same thing from 4th to 5th, 6th to 7th, and then, you know, obviously from 8th to 9th. So.
I have another question also. There's another huge component that I'm not sure that we've really talked about, and that is family, how those, the
Parent
families,
involvement.
parent involvement, and how those families feel about school. Are we doing any outreach to parents of those kids and trying to give them a better feeling about school and more information about their students?
Part of that is part of that Tier 1 intervention piece with teachers, that battle of ground zero where the teacher's really doing it. But it's not something that we've totally focused on, but it is part of changing that culture piece.
Right.
And I know probably Dr. Page or Mr. Mace might be able to address a little bit. They have a much higher parent interest in the things they're doing with their parent-teacher conferences.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Some of the reach that we do with parents is we do student-led conferences. So the students are aware of, as we talked about our data, the students are aware of all those pieces of data and how they're improving and what they're struggling with. And so students come in and they'll lead those conferences with the parent there. So it's a team effort. The other thing is that we set goals with our kids, and part of that goal-setting process is, what do you need the teacher to do to support you? What do you need your parent to do? And they all sign those things. The other thing is we have watchdogs where we try to get dads involved into our school to come in and help us with security and help us just be part of the school. And so we have things like that are going on, constantly working to improve our parent input. We have science nights and open houses and plays that go on and all kinds of things to get all of our parents in. You know, one of the things that we do at the intermediate school is feed them and they will come. And so we set up times that we can just maybe grill for the parents and have them come in and talk to their teachers and look at technology that their kids are showing, or just a number of things. Try to have a number of activities. We do cardiac kids to get them into for healthy lifestyles, and you know, promote exercise and those types of things in our school, just to get parents involved. So, and in all parts of our process, our parents are contacted. They're all part of that process. When we look at our behavior pyramid, it's a similar process. We have different tiers that we go. We get our parents involved in that. We take them as a partner. Sometimes parents don't know what to do, and so we work as a team, myself, our counselor, the student, and the parent, to figure out what are the things that we can do to help their student be successful. So really try to make it a good experience when the parent comes in. And those are just some of the examples of what we're doing to get parents in. I will tell you, we just finished with our parent-teacher conferences. We were at 98% participation, and so we just keep trying to get better at it. And our doors are open for parents to come in and ask us questions and participate and be a part. They're a really important part of the team. That's a really good question.
I think from a high school point of view, it's something we definitely can improve upon, but just statistically, we see that the higher grade, the lower the parent involvement. But some of the things we're using technology, we're calling on the attendance. We're also using their grades and connecting it with, just like they call for poor attendance, we do automatic calls for someone failing. It's not the best piece of communication, but it's another way we can use technology to try to keep the parents going and get them in here to communicate and find out what's going on with their student.
One of the things, we're able to get very specific on what students need, and so a lot of times parents are intimidated by, they just don't even know how to help the kid. And so because we're so specific with which standards they're doing well in and which they're not, we're able to give them some strategies to use at home. And that's just another way to get our parents involved. When we talk to a team, before we end that team discussion, we're talking about, what am I going to do as a principal? What's the counselor going to do to help support the kid? What's the kid going to do? And then what's the parent going to do to help us? And so just really giving them some tools to help their student. Nobody wants to see their student not be successful. Nobody wants to see their student drop out. So we try to give them all the tools that we can to help them.
Going along with that, how often do you guys do home visits? Because I know Ms. Beasley commented with the alternative school, if there's issues going on, then they'll just do a home visit. Because I understand with the technology and the calls, that's all well and good. I'm not saying that there's bad things associated with that, but there are those parents that, as far as they are not getting those phone calls, or if they are, they really don't care about those phone calls. They themselves probably were a dropout, so they really don't care if their child continues on, because their mentality is, well, I'm seeing me doing okay without it. Why today? How is home visits?
I know at the lower grades that we're pretty at least in the intermediate building, we're pretty consistent. I probably do 3 home visits a week at minimum. There's not an option to not be involved in the process. So we have different tiered systems. We start out with just the counselor and I might come on a home visit. Then we might bring in, if it still is not successful, we might bring in a social worker to help us. We might bring in, there's a number of different people in the community that can help us. And so ultimately, we just keep bringing it back and keep trying. So, I would say right now I'm probably at 3, maybe 4 home visits. It's not an option. We do the same thing for attendance in the lower grades. I'll go out to their home. I will drive kids to school, things like that. Anything that I can do to get the kid to school so that we can help them. So, and then I also find out when I go to home visits, what do the parents need? And so, because sometimes they don't have their needs met. So there are resources that we have at the school that we can get community members in action using, whether it be Bright Futures or whatever those pieces are, to get parents what they need to make sure we get the kids to school. All those things help build a strong relationship with the parents and with the community.
I would say at the high school, we look at relying on the counselors to begin those things and try to get a parent in the building and work through the student and the parent. But obviously, one of the things you mentioned, what's more challenging in the high school is when that kid gets old enough and they decide not to even be at home. There's a whole new twist to the challenge at the high school level. Is now we don't even have a parent to contact. We're trying to motivate and challenge a student that has decided to move out, and inevitably, I think they do okay for a month, and then when there's nobody pushing them, we slowly begin to lose them, and we don't even have that connection piece. I'm not making an excuse for what we're not doing to communicate with parents, but that is one of the unique challenges in high school sometimes when we don't even have that. We're relying on a kid that's really trying to make it on their own. And then again, that's where the system, we try to get the counselor, try to get Mrs. Beasley involved, and just keep working that system. Me, personally, usually I'm not doing a home visit, it's a parent coming in and it's a conference.
So as we're supportive with parents and families at the lower grades, they want to be more involved with the school because the school is a source of resources for them, is a source to help them. And so even when kids, like I can see when kids decide to leave home and they're struggling, you know, if we have developed a good, strong relationship with that kid along the way, hopefully they're going to come and look to us to help them get what they need to survive, get what they need to be successful. Is that it?
I just want to thank the presenters, everybody that came in today to discuss what we're trying to do as far as helping students be successful. And one message I would like parents or community members or students to get is that in the Aurora School District not succeeding, you're going to have to really work hard to not succeed, because you've got staff members and administrators and things in place that are going to push students, push parents, push community for the most important goal, and that is to make sure that every student that comes into our door as a kindergartner, if they remain the whole time, they graduate, they walk across the stage with a degree in time, and that we have those things in place to make sure that that happens. And so I think that you know, that's probably the one message out of today's presentation, is just to give you data, to give you information, so that you understand what we are trying to do here and what the actual goal of the district is, and that's to help all students be successful. Or as our mission statement is, to ensure all students are successful learners. And so, any questions for me? If not, thank you very much for coming. We'll see you next month.